So there is a really fascinating, detailed article that's out about Kamala Harris, and it's an article. It's in the New York Post, and it says Democrats fear Kamala Harris can't beat any GOPer in 2024, including Trump. And so it kind of goes into detail about Kamala Harris's situation in terms of her staff and her office and what she's doing as vice president. She's been very controversial as of late, apparently. And remember that Kamala Harris flopped really, really hard. She had to drop out because her numbers dropped below 4 points. So clearly the voters didn't want her as president of the United States. Now, of course, she's vice president. But the thing is, when Biden ran in 2008, he did basically as poorly as Kamala Harris did. Maybe even worse, but I can't remember if he got like 4% in Iowa. He was straight garbage, Joe Biden. He was terrible. And that was like his third time running or second or third time running. He's ran like a million times for president. So based on that trend, you could see that maybe I would imagine Kamala Harris being attached to the centipede of it started off with Bill Clinton and then it went to Hillary, then it went to Obama, then it went to Biden. Now the next, heir apparent is Kamala Harris. You would imagine that they would be all around her, but she just doesn't really seem to have the same charisma or people skills or just any of that, really. Not that Joe Biden really has any of those. So I don't know what the Democratic voters are voting for. Honestly, Democratic voters are quite the enigma. But let's go ahead and get into this article. Because it's pretty interesting. So it says Democrats are increasingly fearful Vice President Kamala Harris's missteps will open the door for Republicans to regain the White House, a new report said Friday. Dems, including senior White House officials, fear that Harris will lose to any Republican she faces, including former President Donald Trump, if President Biden does not seek re-election in 2024. While Harris will still be the presumptive nominee, if Biden becomes the first president since LBJ to not seek a second full term, Axios reports that a series of blunders have left officials and operatives concerned. Right now, one operative told Axios, the feeling among Democrats isn't, oh no, our heir apparent is effing up. What are we going to do? It's more that people think, oh, she's effing up. Maybe she shouldn't be the heir apparent. So it looks like they're having some second thoughts to adding Kamala to that centipede. It says Harris has repeatedly been criticized for handling of the illegal immigration crisis along the U.S.-Mexico border, problem Biden dumped in her lap in March by tasking her to deal with the root causes of the issue. The vice president initially ignored calls for her to visit the area, instead traveling to Guatemala and Mexico last month. While there, she shrugged off more questions about when she would visit the border, telling NBC's Lester Holt that I haven't been to Europe before, adding, I don't understand the point that you're making. That moment, which at least one commentator described as worthy of a Julia Louis-Dreyfus' character on the HBO show Veep, was followed last week by Harris traveling to El Paso, a perfunctory visit that took her hundreds of miles from the epicenter of the border crisis. Then earlier this week, Politico dropped a bombshell report that described Harris's office as, quote, chaotic with the, quote, tense and at times dour atmosphere. People are thrown under the bus from the very top. There are short fuses, and it's an abusive environment, one of Politico's nearly 24 sources told the outlet. It's not a healthy environment, and people often feel mistreated. It's not a place where people feel supported, but a place where people feel treated like shit. According to Axios, several White House officials also have described Harris's office as a shit show, poorly managed, and staffed with people who don't know the vice president well. Much of the blame has landed at the door of Harris' chief of staff Tina Flournoy, who is depicted as so controlling and overly protective of the vice president that requests for meetings and friendly interviews languish unanswered for weeks. Flournoy has also been accused of dismissing or ignoring staff ideas and refusing to delegate responsibility. The Democratic officials who spoke to Axios said that in addition to Harris's, quote, handling of high-profile issues and political tone deafness, they fear she's been given bad advice by her press and communications people. Harris still has her defenders, including senior advisor and chief spokesperson Simone Sanders, as well as a White House senior advisor Cedric Richmond, who accused unnamed people of carrying out a whisper campaign designed to sabotage her. At some point, it just becomes one person says something long enough and it becomes an urban legend. It doesn't have to be credible. It doesn't have to be real. Someone says something and they can just snowball, Richmond told Axios, later adding, you just hope if there's a legitimate criticism, they'd put their name next to it. This is pretty interesting as well because a lot of the Trump reports during the Trump administration, they were anonymous. We didn't know what their name was because they didn't put their name next to it. So when the reports are coming for the Trump administration, what's going on under Trump, it's legit. But when it's happening under Kamala, it's fake news, bro. Fake news. Meanwhile, White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain offered unreserved praise for Harris, obviously. Obviously, they're going to reporter Jen Psaki as well. I'm not surprised at all by what's going on with Kamala Harris when it comes to the situation in her office and the way that she's doing her job. For some reason, she just doesn't seem to have the chops to really handle it. She also, kind of reminds me of, remember the whole binder situation with Amy Klobuchar where she was throwing binders and like eating salads with combs and just like all this crazy stuff. Kamala Harris was a cop. She was a prosecutor. Probably isn't a very nice person. And so I'm not too surprised that there's kind of what appears to be some heavy authoritarian nature going on in her office. And she's picked some wrong people. She doesn't really seem to have the chops that other people do, as evidenced by her, having to drop out of the presidential race before a single primary was held. Think about how embarrassing that is, man. She went to like 15 points. She went all the way down below 4 points nationally, and she had to drop out before Iowa. Think about how embarrassing that is. So clearly there is some lacking of like that Obama-like charisma. But the problem is Biden doesn't have any charisma either of any sort. He just rages at people with this demented rage because his brain is degenerated into mush. So I don't really know, but it's very obvious. Like if you're denying this report, first of all, these reports are almost always legit. They're coming from sources pretty obvious. We've seen them. A lot of times these reports will come out. People won't believe them, and then later they'll be proven true. But it's pretty obvious that this is legit, and anybody could see this from a mile away, especially with all of the controversy that she has been causing with all of her actions as of late. And so it's pretty interesting to see Democrats themselves being worried, like, man, did we pick the right heir apparent to Joe Biden? And if he were to have picked a different vice president, I don't know who he would have gone with. I would say Gretchen Whitmer or Amy Klobuchar were probably the top picks. I'm not really sure who else he would have gone with in that situation, but Kamala Harris is clearly being groomed to be the next one in that line of centrist Democrats. I mean, it's obvious who they chose, why they chose her, what she's going to be in the future. It is definitely obvious that this is going on, but I'm not surprised at all. And in a Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump like election, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, in 2024, I don't even know if Trump is a serious presidential candidate in terms of winning anymore. I really have no idea. Probably not, but I don't know for sure. Obviously, you can't know anything for sure anymore. But could she beat Trump? I don't know. Would she do as well as Joe Biden would? No. Joe Biden had a great strategy of, I'm just going to not say anything. I won't even appear. Nobody's going to care because they want the president to shut up. And so that's what he ran on. Kamala Harris, I don't know if she's really got the chops to be able to really run an effective campaign against Donald Trump. Or what if it's Kamala Harris versus Ron DeSantis? Does she have that Obama-like charisma or, speed or things of that nature? And you got to remember, politics is just essentially Newtonian. Every 8 years there's 2 terms of something, and then the next time there's 2 terms of another thing, or maybe there's 1 term of one thing and then 1 term of another. It's just, Americans are very polar. In 2016 they hated the status quo, and so they went with Trump, like, oh, we're gonna fuck the status quo in the ass. We're gonna blow the whole thing up. Then COVID happens, and it's like, oh, wait a second, we went with the wrong guy. Then you go with somebody else who's very status quo because you want that back. And then who knows? Maybe in 4 years, Americans want to hit the status quo again. Americans are very schizophrenic in that way. So that's what you're going to see in 2024. So it's hard to predict. But I will say Kamala Harris, out of all of those people, although Biden is really, Dude has no charisma whatsoever. Neither does Hillary, for that matter, which really makes Democratic voters an enigma. The one thing about Barack Obama that can't be denied was that he had insane amounts of charisma, and he was he had a lot of swag, and he was somebody who was able to really appeal to people, had a lot of people skills. The others, Hillary Clinton was kind of a zombie, witch zombie type of person, almost like, something totally different. Joe Biden just demented lunatic rages at people, so there's no charisma there, obviously. And then Kamala Harris is just downright cringe, man.